Well, hello there. Welcome to the second season of Monsters Dissected. As you can see, things have changed a bit. I'm in the process of redrawing the cockatrice avatar, so not all poses are ready, but make do with what I have. The update to the aesthetics is quite a long procedure, so bear with me. Turns out improving production quality actually takes a significant amount of effort. Rambling without a script with looped stock footage in the background is starting to seem a lot more attractive. Anyway, you are not here for this devilishly handsome hybrid rooster. The monster we are about to dissect should be the focus of attention, so let's get this thing on the autopsy table. What is the Ahuizotl? Well, two things really, but let's start with the beast. In Aztec mythology, the Ahuizotl is a surprisingly significant creature associated with the water god Tlaloc. They are described as black, dog-like entities that live in fresh water, mainly in streams or rivers. The majority of depictions show no teeth, or mostly sharp ones, but it is important to know that I did find at least two that seem to be equipped with rodent incisors. They evoke a monkey pose and sport a long prehensile tail. It is almost always depicted with the implement curled, hiding its most distinctive characteristic, a human hand at the end of it. Yes, a human one. It is specifically stated to not be a monkey paw, regardless of how logical that would be. This fifth limb is not only rather unique, but the main tool for its hunting modus operandi. This insidious little beast is a vicious carnivore. Well, not quite, but we'll get to that. Regardless, it hunts people, preying on those who wander close to their watery habitat or swim too deep. Fishermen are particularly susceptible to Ahuizotl attacks. When the victim is within tail distance, the fifth hand of the creature reaches out and grabs the person, dragging them to a watery grave. The method they kill with is simply drowning. They don't bite, they don't scratch, they don't strangle. They just hold firm. Then they feed. However, as I've alluded to it already, they are not quite the meat-eating type, being rather picky about what they consume. See, the bodies of the victims float to the surface 3 days following the attack, always on time and unblemished, except for a few missing parts. The folkloric accounts describe how the corpses no longer have their teeth, nails and eyeballs attached. Apparently, these less than nutrition-rich features of the human body are delicacies of the water monster, surgically removing them with their sharp claws. Quite the odd taste, but they are willing to go to great lengths to obtain their fill of proteins and keratin. Ahuizotl do not always wait patiently for prey, they often try and lure them. The creatures either do this by imitating fish or make small aquatic animals jump from the water. While this may attract the odd fisherman, I do not suspect this strategy has a high success rate. Even more so since the Florentine Codex describes how they cry like a baby when they fear to drown the human they targeted. That's what they sound like. It's not meant to be an insult, I think. The thing is, even though the Florentine Codex exists as a primary source, the only copy of it I could find online was the original, so I had to use secondary sources instead, and some things may have been lost in translation. One of these contentious topics, for instance, is the name itself, as there seems to be a lot of confusion surrounding it. Ahuizotl is a Nahuatl composite word, which was the Aztec language, unsurprisingly. I don't speak it, and most of the sources I found couldn't either. Details got all muddled and mixed, resulting in a total of 3 interpretations, only one of which seems to be correct. Some of my books stated that Ahuizotl means water opossum, but that seems to be a misinterpretation of the fact that many believe the water opossum to be the animal the beast is based on. That's probably a swing and a miss, but what about the second one? Most sources refer to it as a water dog. Seems a reasonable assumption based on the appearance, but unfortunately, unlike Alec Baldwin, we're still firing blanks. I found a fine little article on Mexico lore, which is the translation of a Spanish work. Apparently, water dog would be Aizcuintli in Nahuatl. Close, but not quite there yet, especially since the Florentine Codex, the very tome we get most of our Ahuizotl lore from, identifies Aizcuintli as the otter. So what does the name really translate to? According to a historian by the name of Father Angel Maria Garibay, the A is short for atl, meaning water. Huiz refers to huizli, which is the word for thorn, and otl is derived from yotl, as in to be like. Therefore, it roughly means aquatic thorny one. It is theorized that the thorns refer to the fact that the animal's hair sticks together into little spiky bits when wet. Mystery solved. Not by me, but still. Now, interestingly enough, the Ahuizotl is also often depicted with this green flappy thing covering it. I have found little information as to what it is theorized to be, but since it is not a constant feature, I do believe it is simply seaweed, potentially showing this ambush predator hiding among the leaves, ready to strike. Alternatively, it might have something to do with its religious connotations. Like I already said, it did play a non-insignificant role in Aztec beliefs. Corpses mutilated by Ahuizotl could only be recovered by priests, as their killings had quite a significant effect on the soul of the deceased. This is due to the fact that drowning was not necessarily a bad thing for the Aztecs. Those who were killed by one of the most unpleasant methods were actually transported to Tlalocan, a verdant paradise. Once they overcame their crippling trauma of aquatic origins, they had an eternity to enjoy the rich, mostly edible greenery of this subterranean realm, ruled over by the rain god Tlaloc, residing there with his helpers going by the name Tlaloc, and his wife, Calcuitlicue. I wonder how the toothless dead pronounce that one. These entities had the habit of choosing good people, ones who distinguished themselves by their benevolent acts in life, to be horribly killed by Ahuizotls, so they get to hang out in the afterlife. Bit of a warped outlook on life, that one, even more so since apparently hoarding precious stones, valuables that should be offered to the water gods, can also net you this wonderful fate. So be a living saint or a greedy bitch and you'll end up at literal paradise. I'd like to assume that the latter did not get to have an eternal holiday, but I did not find anything that would disprove that. In fact, just simply drowning on your own will get you to Tlalocan, so it's not exactly an exclusive place. If that's not a death you fancy, you can also get hit by lightning, catch a deadly waterborne disease, or be born with some physical deformity and still end up down there. I'm not intimately familiar with Aztec theology, but it's kind of a weird selection of people to automatically send to the equivalent of heaven. There is also the detail that just setting eyes on an Ahuizotl invites death, but if you are not killed in the variety of ways supported by Tlaloc, do you get denied the entry to paradise? Having meta knowledge kind of defeats the horror event too, doesn't it? If you spot one of these five-headed creatures, the best thing to do is to just get over with it. I wonder why every fervent Aztec didn't just drown themselves the moment they learned of this loophole. I guess most people are just not as convinced about the surety of a pleasant afterlife when it comes down to actually facing death. Still, probably more comforting than living every moment of your life as if the sword of Damocles was hanging above you by a thin thread, ready to come down at any second, using every bit of your remaining sanity to seek out fleeting distractions that keep you from thinking about the inevitability that is to come, a black oblivion with no thoughts or emotions, no past or future. Sorry, didn't realize this door was open. Including the ability to despair. Anyway, we still have a bit of lore linked to the Ahuizotl. The 8th Aztec ruler chose this name for himself and used the beast as his symbol, ruling Tenochtitlan in the 1486 to 1502 period. He was a great military mind, expanding the Aztec territories quite a bit, and oversaw the expansion of the Great Pyramid. He also sacrificed a few hundred people to garner godly favor. However, while this act can be considered morally reprehensible, we should keep in mind that such practices were considered sacred and righteous in their society, so branding Ahuizotl as evil is not exactly accurate, at least by their standards. With all that said, it is clear that the creature by the name Ahuizotl was more mythical than rooted in reality. However, it doesn't hurt to look around in the fauna of the area to see if it could have been inspired by anything in particular. I've already mentioned that it being an otter, a very prominent theory, does not hold water. Beside it being described as a different animal, otters do not have a prehensile tail, only attack humans if provoked, and have small round ears instead of the more prominent, often pointed ones of the monster. Giant otters are blackish, but they live exclusively in South America. I'd also count out the possibility of the Ahuizotl being a species of monkey, even though numerous local simiformes have the right kind of tail, minus the human hand, and some are even black. Few people would call any of them dog-like. Their visages are recognizably those of monkeys. Their ears do not match, plus none of them are aquatic or man-eaters. An honorable mention goes to the armored rat too, but mostly for their spiky disposition. They do not live as far north as Mexico, and do not fill most of the remaining criteria either. There is also the proposed water opossum, which some claim to be the very meaning of the Ahuizotl word. They may have been wrong about the latter part, but there is some credence to their theory. The water opossum is at least partially black, has pretty sophisticated little paws, sports a prehensile tail, lives near water, obviously, has a roughly canine head with ears that can be seen as pointy from some angles, and thus kind of look a bit spiky when wet. Searching for anything with the wet adjective is always a gamble, but there are a couple images that show the possums after a swim. Not the most convincing, but still a bit hedgehoggy. They also hunt for small fish and other aquatic animals, so them making such critters jump out of the water is a likely scenario. However, they are pretty small, definitely not big enough to do more than annoyingly tug at someone's ankles. As for baby cries, I unfortunately have no idea what they sound like exactly. I found no footage of them where they are talkative, but water opossums apparently hiss or growl. If they are anything like other opossums, I would not liken their vocals to infant wailing. Now, it is perfectly plausible that these nocturnal marsupials did serve as an inspiration to some extent, but it is practically impossible to mistake them for anything but an extremely young Ahuizotl. Luckily, there might still be one contender the beast could have been modeled after: kinkajous. Beside being adorable beyond fucking belief, they fit many of the criteria too. Their face is canine enough to pass for an Ahuizotl, sporting ears with designs similar to those of water opossums, round from some angles, pointy from others. They have an even more prominent prehensile tail, monkey-like paws, and look very spiky after a swim. Their size seems to be closer to the one seen on depictions, as is their voice to the accounts. Well, they sound more like squeaky toys, but close enough. They range from light to dark brown, but since kinkajous are nocturnal, calling them black is not too much of a stretch. Where they fall short, however, is that they are not aquatic, as you could probably guess by their build. Not exactly the vicious predator of legends pulling fishermen to their doom. Still, I do believe there is a link between these cute little fuckers and the Ahuizotl, as they are probably the closest thing to a real equivalent. Returning viewers might already see where I'm going with this. It is indeed time to transition into the speculative evolution part, taking a look at what a real, more accurate Ahuizotl could be. We're off to a good start with long-tongued furballs, but still not quite there. First things first, could something closely related to them be an aquatic predator? Well, fortunately for us, kinkajous do belong to the carnivore order, being a hair's breadth away from slaughtering people for sustenance. The circumstances of their habitat led them to abandon most of the meat from their diet, shifting to a mostly fruit-based one with a side of other plant parts. Kinkajous still eat some insects, small vertebrates, and the occasional egg, but are unlike their ancestors in this regard. However, we could theorize the scenario where such a strong divergence never occurred for a subset of early kinkajous. Let's say they managed to stand their ground against the predecessors of neotropical otters, carving out an existence for themselves along water bodies, hunting for small mammals, reptiles, and amphibians, as well as catching fish in the shallows. The phylogenetic timeline does not seem to conflict for this hypothetical scenario, as otters have likely evolved 500,000 years ago, while kinkajous could have appeared roughly 1,000,000 years ago in Central America. This carnivorous lifestyle led them to retain a more prominent muzzle, grow slightly larger, and exhibit a strong territorial nature. Kinkajous, while usually tame, can be rather irritable and are known to have attacked people, so we are not straying too far from their parallelly developed relatives. The territorial behavior is mostly necessary to give them a drive to fight early otters, rather than look for other habitats or food sources. Plus there's an ulterior motive, but let's stay on course. Since our Ahuizotl to be species would often get wet, their fur would also change. And I'm not referring to the lower accurate palette swap. It's not exactly a benefit to haul around a pool's worth of water while running or climbing. Water repellency is not a necessity, but something less dense and woolly would be a lot more advantageous. they essentially become a bit less fluffy. A tragedy, I know, but a sacrifice we must make. Also, their tail is better off naked. Having no or very short hair allows it to be better for propelling them while taking brief dives or swimming around the shallows. However, they remain prehensile and have limited tapering, as the tails would still need to double as a fifth arm when traversing the branches. Yes, the Ahuizotls would still frequent the trees. Not only is it a perfect place to hide from larger predators, it is also a place otters can't get to, giving them one more potential edge in the water dog wars. Kinkajous are nocturnal, but I'd rather have the new animal be ephemeral or crepuscular, meaning irregular or twilight activity, respectively. We need to keep in mind that Ahuizotls would need to be encountered more often than their frugivorous counterparts. They are known to interact with people, particularly with fishermen, so there is a need for activity during daytime or twilight hours at the very least. A nocturnal lifestyle is not the worst thing for a waterside or shallows predator, but changing it is not exactly a detriment either. Now, what else to address? Alright, so far I've been skirting around the tail hand thing as if it was a piece of media that was recommended to me. Alas, it is time to address it. Is it possible for a hand to evolve at the end of a tail? Well, technically, it should be a possibility over several millions of years. Are fingers more plausible? A bit. They still need separate bone structures, which would take quite a bit of time. What if they are just muscly appendages? Small tentacles, if you will. The thing is, it doesn't really improve the tail. The purpose of this particular tail would be to facilitate both climbing and swimming. Unless the fingers are webbed, they don't really play a role in aquatic traversal, and if they are webbed, they wouldn't be ideal for grabbing branches. Small, dexterous little extensions are not a necessity for a sturdy tail to wrap around a stiff piece of wood and hold it tight. I don't really see the advantage they provide, why natural selection would favor such phenotypic changes over a powerful hunk of meat. They have their pose for anything else that might require a bit more finesse. Also, let's take one more long and hard look at images and statues of the Ahuizotl. The curled or occasionally straight tail is there, but what's that at the end of it? Oh right, it's nothing. To be fair, there is this one particularly famous depiction of a clearly visible little palm, but why is it missing from all the other art? If you've seen some of my videos already, you've probably already guessed where I'm going with this. Say it after me. The human hand at the end of an Ahuizotl tail is an embellishment. Unfortunately, there is no plausible way to add this feature as presented in the lore. I mean, I guess if you look really hard, it almost looks like a long human finger, or a rodent tail if you pull the tube of superglue out of your nose. So, in this hypothetical world, how would the anthropoid hand end up in the legends? Well, let's build on the territorial behavior I've set up earlier. Fishermen intrude on their territories, often hauling freshly caught fish in their boats or casting lines with no intention of leaving. The dark-furred, dog-like animal would naturally try and scare the big, dumb primate from its rightful land. It may splash the water at first, making the angler think there's plenty of fish to be caught. If the Ahuizotl is not spotted or ignored, a more drastic approach is necessary. The animal would swim up to the shore or boat, grab the person, and try and drag them into the water where it has the advantage. In their fright, seeing the vicious creature with the long tail, the victims may mistakenly assume there's a hand atop it. Since the implement is also used for climbing, the Ahuizotl would without a doubt coil it around part of the trespasser too, along with its 4 other finger limbs tearing at various bits. As you'd expect, some, or perhaps most of these encounters would end with the person drowning, joining precious stone thieves in paradise. Others who survive would tell tales of the 5-armed, spiky-furred devil lurking beneath, the monster that cries like a baby if you manage to escape. Well, for the Ahuizotl, it would not be a cute squeaky toy sound, but a bellowing war cry after a brutal but victorious fight. They'd probably still squeak their sonorous roar for people they drowned, but it would fall on dead ears. What would they do with the body though? It is reasonable to assume that some or most Ahuizotls would not eat the human they drowned, tending to their hole instead. Therefore, waterlogged corpses floating downstream might be the end result after all. But that brings us to the next weird part. Missing nails, teeth and eyes. Well, nails have no nutritional value beyond the skin that may be torn out with them. Teeth have nerve and blood vessels that may constitute a bit of a snack for the truly desperate. And eyes, well, eyes are actually eaten quite often by various animals. Let's say that either the Ahuizotl has the habit of clawing out the eyes, or that other animals quickly snack these tender bits for themselves. But that still does not explain the missing nails and teeth. Perhaps some fish start poking at the corpse and make progress on the fingers. Plausible on an anecdotal level. As for the last thing, maybe the Ahuizotl is a spiteful little thing that smashes the head of the victim to rock until their teeth fall out. Maybe Aztecs had so poor dental hygiene their dentures just fell out during the assault. Yeah, not an easy thing to justify. The body would be sooner torn to pieces than lose its teeth. Alright, time to repeat what is probably the serious catchphrase at this point. The delicacies of the Ahuizotl are embellishments. It's just a tall tale this time. I have nothing to ground it. Needless to say, all other supernatural properties and links to water deities also fall into that category, since, you know, that stuff isn't real.
Although I'm pretty sure at some point I'll get a comment telling me how wrong I am about that.
Anyway, we have completed our Kinkajou parallel Ahuizotl. Not my most accurate work to date, but that is due to factors beyond my control, like how evolution and natural selection work. Still, I think this dark-furred aggressive little thing fits in nicely as the first realistic monster of season 2. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed this one, and that the new look is appealing. There was a bit of a time pressure with this one as I simultaneously updated the visuals and worked on the video, and I already see a few poses I'm not too happy with. But it's still an ongoing process. Still, I try and make videos a bit more frequent as I think I'm getting a bit sloppy in that regard. That's the end of my post-video ramblings. Hope to see you next time. Bye!